Okay, let's dive right in. I want you to think about history in a completely new way. Not as a story about kings and queens and battles, but as a massive, powerful machine. A machine that, believe it or not, runs on the very same physical laws that govern stars and atoms. So let's just start with a question that kind of flips everything on its head. What if the rise and fall of great civilizations isn't really about luck or politics or fate? What if it's actually all about pressure and heat and structural integrity? What if we could actually read the engineering blueprint of an empire? The foundational idea we're working with here is called the Vidyabhushan bounce. In engineering, you know you can't just compress something forever. Eventually, any system hits its breaking point, its yield point, and when it does, it doesn't just poof, disappear. It recoils. It has to. It performs this mandatory, often violent snap to release all that built up tension and find a new, stable state. This isn't chaos. It's a mechanical failsafe built into the fabric of reality. Now, this is where things get really mind-bending. You can scale this idea all the way up, to the absolute maximum, the Big Bang. Maybe it wasn't just a random explosion. What if it was the universe itself hitting its ultimate point of compression and executing the ultimate Vidyabhushan bounce? This cosmic snap basically wound up the universal spring, creating this vast reservoir of potential energy. This is the primary drive for, well, everything that follows. Okay, so if the universe is the primary engine, where do we fit in? Well, human civilizations are like secondary engines. We are these incredibly complex machines, brilliantly designed to tap into that cosmic energy, from the sun to fossil fuels to the atom, and convert that raw potential into organized social complexity. But here's the thing about engines. They all have rules. They all have to follow some very strict laws. And for societies, let's call them the laws of social thermodynamics. In physics, the second law of thermodynamics tells us that doing any kind of work always creates waste heat and disorder. That's entropy. And for a nation, this is not just a neat metaphor. Social heat is the very real friction that's generated as society runs its course. It's the drag from bureaucracy, it's the waste heat from corruption, and it's the vibrational stress from civil unrest. So the multi-trillion-dollar question is, how does an engine keep from overheating and just seizing up? Well, it has to become what's called a dissipative structure. This is basically a system that keeps its own internal order, its low entropy state, by actively pumping its waste heat, its disorder, out into its surroundings. And this is just a brilliant illustration of how empires pulled it off for centuries. The frontier, the colonies, these were the perfect radiators. They were giant external heat sinks. You could export disgruntled populations, criminals, political rivals, all the friction points of the core out to the periphery. This allowed the imperial center to stay cool, stable, and highly ordered. But everything has a breaking point. Every material has a limit. In social mechanics, we call this the yield point. It's that moment, that precise moment when the internal social heat becomes so intense that it overwhelms the structural bonds holding the nation together, whether that's a shared ideology, a constitution, or a set of laws. The system can't bend anymore. It's about to snap. Okay, so let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. We're going to look at 5 different civilizations, and each one has a completely unique engine design for managing these thermodynamic laws. First up, the United States. You can think of the US as a high-pressure steam turbine. It was designed from the ground up for constant accelerating flow. Its core function, thermodynamically speaking, was to avoid internal heat death by always expanding. Manifest destiny wasn't just an idea, it was a thermodynamic necessity, a giant expansion valve to cool social pressures by venting them west into the frontier. Great Britain, on the other hand, was engineered completely differently. It was like a massive, slow-spinning flywheel. The purpose wasn't speed, it was stability. It stored immense institutional energy and used its global colonial network as the ultimate heat sink, exporting all the social and industrial soot of the empire to keep the engine house in London running nice and smooth. Japan offers a totally different design. See, as an isolated island nation, it couldn't just export its heat. There was no real frontier. So what did it have to do? It had to perfect a hyper-ordered, almost crystalline social lattice. The goal was to become one of the most internally efficient systems in history, reducing social friction to near zero through concepts like harmony or wa to avoid overheating in the first place. The South Korean model is fascinating. It's like a super compressed piston. I mean, think about it. After the Korean War, it was a system in a state of maximum chaos. So the miracle on the Han River was, in essence, a rapid adiabatic compression. A huge amount of social work was applied so incredibly quickly that the system's temperature, its economic energy, just skyrocketed without having time to lose that heat to the outside world. And finally, India, which represents something else entirely. It's more like a resilient, adaptive ecosystem. You see, while a lot of Western engineering tries to eliminate noise and chaos, the Indian system evolved to treat that noise as a functional component. Its social lattice is, well, it's viscoelastic. It doesn't shatter under stress. It deforms, it absorbs the shock, and then it just bounces back. It's a living, breathing example of the Vidyabhushan balance principle. So, we've seen these incredible, complex engine designs. But here's the catch. Thermodynamics is ruthless. It's unforgiving. Every single engine has a red line. And that brings us to the inevitable, the snap.
The process of collapse isn't some big mystery. It's actually pretty mechanical. First, social friction builds up. The cost of just maintaining the system starts to exceed the useful work you get out of it. Second, the yield point is reached. The ideology gets brittle, the bonds weaken. And finally, the snap. It's a sheer failure, a sudden violent collapse back to a simpler high entropy state as the engine shatters.
And this brings us right to our modern crisis, because for the first time in history, the frontiers are closed. The entire planet is a single interconnected engine. So what happens when there are no more external radiators? Where does all that social heat go now? What we're seeing is a massive mechanical realignment. The 20th century model was a single global engine, right? Heat from a supply chain collapse in one place or a regional war somewhere else traveled instantly to everyone. The emerging model is what you might call independent, isolated systems, where nations are actively trying to decouple, to install clutches, really, to protect themselves from the vibrations of the whole system. And this right here is the new grand strategy. The drive for energy independence, for semiconductor sovereignty, for reshoring supply chains, these aren't just buzzwords or economic policies. They are attempts to build thermodynamic firewalls. It's all about controlling your own internal temperature when the world outside is starting to overheat.
So, given all this massive cosmic and social machinery, it's easy to wonder, where do we fit in? Are we just cogs, doomed to be ground down by the gears?
Well, the mechanics of this whole thing actually suggest the exact opposite. We are not passive components. We are what you could call active anti-entropic units. Life itself, and especially conscious life, is the ultimate anti-entropic force. We are the part of the universal engine that has learned to observe its own gears and actively compress the chaotic noise of the universe into the coherent signal of order.
And that right there is the key takeaway. We can't violate the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is always going to win in the end. But our job isn't to defeat it. Our job is to negotiate with it. We are the system's mechanics, constantly moving the social heat around, lubricating the gears, and strengthening the lattice just to keep the core of civilization spinning for as long as we possibly can.
Which leaves us with a final, massive question to chew on. If we truly live inside a machine, a universe governed by these cold, hard mechanical laws, are we simply meant to play our part and follow the blueprint? Or is our ultimate purpose to understand the physics so well that we can finally learn how to become the engineers?